Ecclesiastes 5:19 and 20. To every man also the Lord has given riches and wealth, and given power to eat thereof, and to take his portion, and to rejoice in his labor. This is the gift of God. For he shall remember no more the days of his life, because God will keep him busy with the joy of his heart. You know, oftentimes our work takes up a lot of time. But as Christians, our work that gives us most joy should be the work the Lord has for us, because it will give rewards that won't pass away. Are we busy oftentimes with the things of this life, or are we busy with the things of the Lord that give life? We should be busy with His things. And oftentimes we're not. Judges 3:12 through 18. Judges 3:12 through 18. Okay. And Jobeth, son of Geranes, died, and the sons of Israel did more on what displeased the Lord. And the Lord strengthened King Agag of Moab, Eglon of Moab, against Israel because of their doings, which displeased the Lord. You know, the Lord made it rougher on them because He wasn't following in their way. They weren't following in His ways. Oftentimes, He'll bring us to the point where He can break us, so He can rebuild us in Him, for Him. And He drew together around Bani, Ammon, and Amalek, and went and defeated Israel, and took possession of the city of palms. So He raided them, He took control of them. The Lord allowed this to happen because of their lack of faith, because they were angering the Lord. You're my people, but you're not following me. Maybe this will turn you to me type attitude. And the sons of Israel were subject to King Eglon of Moab 18 years. The sons of Israel cried to the Lord, and the Lord raised them up a deliverer. They finally cried to the Lord. This is something, if they were calling to the Lord, they would have never had to go through this. Problem is, they rejected the Lord. And finally, they had a cry of despair where they reached out to Him. That's when He came, because they called Him. They didn't call the Baals, they didn't call the Asheroths, they called out to the Lord. And the Lord heard them. Sometimes we got to be at our lowest for us to actually turn to the Lord. And it's sad, because we should be turning to Him at our highest through praise. We should be able to turn to Him at our lowest through praise, but also with the need. He provides our needs even when we don't realize. But if we're not struggling, we still have a need that He provides us. He just so happens to provide us enough to where we don't struggle in the times where we don't have struggling. But He's always providing our needs. The times are good, and we need to be praising Him, because our needs are so met that they ain't really needs. In verse 14, the sons of Israel, verse 15, the sons of Israel cried to the Lord, and the Lord raised up them up a deliverer, Ehud, son of Gera, the Benjamite, a left-handed man. And the sons of Israel were sending a tribute to the king Eglon of Moab. Okay, being left-handed isn't very common, so his fighting technique would have been very different than most people. So for them to actually defend him would have been different than they would most people. This would have helped on the battlefield. And Ehud made himself a sword with 2 edges, a foot long, and belted it under his brand line, of his right rib. Okay, most people would have it on their left side because they'd be pulling out with their right hand. He'd be pulling out with his left hand from his right side. So most likely they may not even check that side because being left-handed is uncommon. 2 edges, that means he can cut with the front and the back. He presented the tribute to King Eglon of Moab, who was very fat, a very fat man. This shows wealth, overindulgence, taking whatever he wanted. Fat men oftentimes symbolize getting what you want, not having any resistance. And when he had finished presenting the tribute, he dismissed the people who carried the tribute. So he told them to leave. He gave him, the king probably told them to leave. And he turned back to the carved stones at Gilead and said, Your Majesty, I have some private business with you. And he said, Quiet. And all who were standing in the presence went out from him. So this is typical how you deal with things. And that's where we stop. The Lord had a plan. See, he wins the favor of the king. The king is kind of cocky. The king realizes Israel's in a state to where they're presenting him gifts because they're not following the Lord. Their Lord's kind of left them type attitude. Their Lord hasn't left them. They left the Lord, but they came back. So it happens that the plan starts unfolding to where he tells them, I got something to tell you in private. So he and the king's the only ones in the room. He's got his sword hidden, and sometimes the Lord has us plan ahead to fulfill his purpose. Sometimes we need to plan ahead, but we also need to be prepared to be spontaneous.